I'm Martha Zavala, President of the League of Women Voters, Pasadena area. Welcome to Thursday with the League, Educating for Democracy, Status and Future. Before we get to our program, let's take a moment to acknowledge that this week will mark the 20-year anniversary since 9/11 and almost 2 years of a pandemic. We want to thank our veterans, first responders, essential workers, and their families for the sacrifices they have made on our behalf. This is also National Suicide Prevention Week. Remember that we can save lives just by educating ourselves and our families. The more you know, the more you can help. Avoiding an issue does not make it go away. And now, before we hear from our guest speaker, I want to provide a brief overview of today's program. We will spend half of our time hearing from our speaker, after which we will take time to answer questions you have. Please enter your questions by clicking on the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Enter your questions as you think of them. Don't wait till the end. Our moderator will present the questions for a response. Be aware that questions may be edited for brevity and to avoid duplicates. We may not have time to include all the questions. If we don't get to yours, please send it separately by email to events@lwvpa.org, and we'll try to get you an answer within the next few days. And please do not enter your question or any comments in the chat box, as this is used for the webinar staff to keep things running smoothly. I think if chat is enabled and you want to send a message to a friend or anything like that, I think we're okay. But just send the message that you're having difficulty with the sound or something directly to one of our hosts, please. After the Q&A, we will announce opportunities to take action and then close our workshop. So right now we're pleased to announce that Pasadena Media is again recording our presentation and will be posting the video on our YouTube channel for viewing later. Now, to get to the reason you're joining us this morning, we're very excited to present this relevant and important topic about the future of civics education in our schools. Today, we'll hear from Dr. Michelle Herzog of the Los Angeles County Board of Education as she explores how educators can inspire students to become civically engaged. And here to welcome her are two members of our board, Kim Cubero, Director of our Education Committee, and Kelsey Green, our League Secretary and Education Committee Chair. Kim and Kelsey, please introduce yourselves and Dr. Herzog.
Good morning. I'd like to introduce our co-chair of the Pasadena Area Education Committee, Kelsey Green, who also serves as our secretary on the League board.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kelsey Green. I am the chair of the Pasadena League of Education Committee. And Education Committee does really important work. We advocate for our youth. We have to get them prepared for what's coming next in life. And every step that we take is very important. And I like to introduce Dr. Michelle Herzog. And take it away, Dr. Herzog.
Oh, well, actually, excuse me. So sorry. I just wanted to say it's a great pleasure for Kelsey and me to introduce our speaker, Dr. Michelle Herzog, who's going to talk to us about educating for American democracy. Exploring K-12 civic learning and engagement is one of the top priorities of our Education Committee. And this is a subject about which we should all be deeply interested, as it is imperative that we provide our students with an historic understanding as well as civic skills. She will address how we can cultivate historic honesty and patriotism to allow both love and critique of country, as well as how to inspire students to become involved with their constitutional democracy to sustain our republic. She will discuss how to tell a full narrative of America's diverse yet shared story. And finally, she will respond to how we arrive at compromises needed to make our constitutional democracy work. Currently, Dr. Herzog is the History Social Science Consultant for the Los Angeles Office of Education, which serves 80 school districts across Los Angeles County, including 13 cities within our Pasadena League area. So after our committee heard Dr. Herzog speak as a panelist for the Commonwealth Club of California virtual program on the future of American history back in January, we knew she would be invaluable. We are excited to hear from a speaker who has a distinguished career and years of leadership at the local, state, and national levels, which uniquely qualifies her to address the challenges our schools face for preparing students to participate fully in government. On behalf of the Education Committee of the League of Women Voters, Pasadena area, we are pleased to present Dr. Michelle Herzog.
Well, thank you so much for that very generous introduction. And I need to thank you too for giving attention to this very important topic. Teaching for democracy, educating for democracy doesn't just begin when you turn 21 or even 18. It should start in kindergarten. And there are many, many of us who are working toward that at the state level, the local level, and the national level as well. So I'm just deeply honored to be invited and to talk to you a little bit about the work that is going on and what we're trying to do to educate our next generation to be civically engaged and participants in our democracy. A retired Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy said this back in 2013, but I think it's still relevant today. We must have a population that knows the meaning of freedom and its history. Every citizen, and I would qualify that meaning whether you're here legally, illegally, whatever, if you're living in these United States, not just government officials, has the duty to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. But here's the important part of his message. You cannot preserve what you have not studied. You cannot protect what you do not comprehend, and you cannot defend what you do not know. And that's why education is just so key. I'm going to share some of the not so good news to kind of frame our conversation and hopefully some rationale for why this is so important. Here's a study done in 2017 asking, on a scale of 1 to 10, how essential is it to live in a democracy? And you can see the numbers have gone down from our generation before World War II to the millennials now. This is of great concern. We also know very much about the extreme polarization that's occurring in our political landscape. This is a schematic from the 2010s, right? 10 years ago, basically from the House of Representatives. You see Republicans on one side, Democrats on the other, and very few efforts for people to come together. We're seeing that becoming even more extreme now every day. And then there's this. Take a minute. I hope you get a chuckle from this, but it's true. Social media is really kind of defining and redefining good and not so good ways about how Americans should be operating, what they should be following, what should they believe. So news literacy, online literacy is an important piece. You know, the last time students were assessed at a national stage through the nation's report card was in 2014. This is the NAEP report where they they take a random sample of 8th graders across the nation and really trying to determine how much basic knowledge they have in the areas of US history, geography, and civics. So not very good, only 18, 27%, 23% scored at proficient or above, and we're talking basic knowledge, and not much changed since 2010 when this was originally done. So this is of concern to educators. It should be of concern to everyone. Again, our national priorities are not aligned with our needs when it comes down to budget and support. There's at least 9 states who have no civic education requirements. As you know, in California, government class is really not required for our students until 12th grade, their senior year, as a 1-semester course. A lot of us have been urging that to begin much earlier. But at the federal level, $54 per student is spent on STEM education. Less than 5 cents per student is spent on civic education, which tells you where the priorities are. Not to say that STEM is not a priority, but look at poor civic education at a time, I think, when we would need it most. Then there's this, we are all very aware of the many crises our nation has been facing, the challenges we've been facing, front and center, all over the place, that we're paying attention to. But young people are paying attention to this too, and wringing their hands. What can we do? What should we do? Where do we learn these things and how to operate? We want our young people to build those civic muscles and be able to enact policy change, be spokespeople, be involved, be engaged. Our new U.S. Education Secretary, Miguel Cardona, said in July, at a time when democratic institutions are threatened by misinformation and disinformation, we're seeing that, our democracy depends on robust civic engagement and informed public discourse. Civics education can help students become better citizens by developing the skills necessary to distinguish between accurate and inaccurate information. So we're happy to see our new U.S. Education Secretary call this out for us. Now, that being said, there are some great examples out there of great civic learning, civic engagement projects going on in schools, even in LA County, across the state. But unfortunately, they're more of the exception rather than the rule. There's challenges that exist. And so it's important that we address those head on. We all know school is returning, trying to come back to some semblance of normalcy. There's a lot of competing priorities and initiatives going on right now. Our poor teachers and school administrators are really struggling to bring kids and teachers and staffs back. That's got to be front and center. Introducing new ideas and initiatives, well, it's not really the best time for that. There seems to be always other priorities, but we want to keep our eye on the prize as well. Time, and resources, funding for professional development and civic learning, finding time in the school day to weave it into an expanding curriculum, maybe add it as after school or an elective. These are all innovative ways that we challenge people to think about, rethink their time and their use of resources. But really, one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing more and more each year, unfortunately, is the misperception of what high quality civic learning is and is not. There's a lot of concern that we're hearing more and more of families and communities concerned that if civic education is brought into a school or a classroom, that there's an attempt to, I don't know, let's say brainwash students, lead them to a conclusion, lead them to something that may be not accurate. So I wanted to talk about this head on. True or false? There's a belief that most teachers are overwhelmingly liberal with a political agenda when it comes to teaching civics. What a study done has said that that's really false. It is not true at all. Teachers' political beliefs often will mirror those of the community they live in, the communities they serve. They have an orientation toward institutions of government, but usually not the political parties occupying it. So we're trying to dispel those myths that civic learning is not about turning young people into junior Democrats or junior Republicans and mirror the ideology of their teachers. No, that's not really what it's about. Now, we know university professors tend to be decidedly liberal, but there really is no evidence that they shape the view of students, but that peer relations really have a bigger force in that. So as you see, we're trying to dispel that. Here's another source from EdWeek, a study done in 2017 of teachers. Generally speaking, do you think of yourself as very liberal, moderate, conservative, or very conservative? And you can see from this graph, it's very mixed. All right. So not all teachers are liberal. Not all of them are conservative. There's a whole mixture of demographics in classrooms. So this is important data, I think, for us to look at. What is your party affiliation was asked of teachers. Okay. Here again, very mixed. Yes, some are Democrats, some Republicans, some independent, third party, but it's a mixture. So here again, we're trying to dispel those myths that all teachers are out on a political liberal agenda. It really is very mixed. And here again, the RAND Corporation also did a study asking teachers what was the most important priorities for you in teaching. You see at the top of the chart, they feel it was absolutely essential for students to be tolerant of people, groups from different themselves, good work habits, being responsible, global citizens. To be activists falls way down on the list, only at 37%. So here again, we're not out there to try to turn all kids into quote unquote activists. That's not our primary goal in introducing civic learning in our schools. So some more studies asking, what do parents want? What do they want to see? And here again, the Heritage Foundation this year came out with this data. In grades 9 through 12, should civics be emphasized more, less, or stay the same? So here you're seeing data among what they feel should be done for students in high school, but also lower down, you can see in grades K through 8. Parents and teachers want to have a focus on civic education for young people. That should tell us a lot about where our priorities should be around policies, resources, and emphasis and need. Also, we're asked openness to spending more instructional time. Parents say yes. Teachers say yes. They want permission to do this. They want to spend more time on civics because they're realizing the importance and the ramifications, what happens when we don't. We have kids coming out of high school who don't have background knowledge, don't have the skills to be responsibly and civically engaged. Okay. Now, here's good news. Now we're getting to the good stuff, I hope. This is a national initiative that began a few years ago called Educating for American Democracy. And I'm putting the website there too. You can learn more about it. But this was an initiative brought together by a diverse team of over 300 people, historians, political scientists, educators, providers, students, and more. And they represented all ideologies, political ideologies, backgrounds, anything that had to do with civics or education were brought into this work. You can see, here's a glimpse of the many, many people that were involved. How to teach American history and civics in an integrated way, how to prioritize civic participation. And the last piece, and this is becoming more and more apparent and a greater need, how do we address in history classes and civics classes the painful challenges of our American past, but also balance it by recognizing the remarkable achievements of our nation's past? How do we achieve that balance? Yes, there were challenges and mistakes made in the past, but we've also come a long way. It shouldn't be one side or the other. And that's what this initiative is really targeted to achieve. It provides guidance for history education, but also to elevate the importance of civics. It explores why and how to teach civics, history, while building their capacities to sustain our constitutional democracy. This project was launched about 6 months ago, and we're now moving at the national level to kind of move it out as a resource for schools at the national level, state level, and local levels to kind of guide implementation, curriculum, teaching, and learning, and heightening what high quality civic learning should really be about. Now, let me tell you, whenever something comes out at a national level, there's always some nervousness, right? Ooh, different states, education has long been a local control issue. States largely determine what is taught in the form of standards and frameworks. Down at the local level, budgets are formed. There's always often some resistance to get guidance or mandates at a national level. So to be clear, the roadmap for Educating for American Democracy is not a mandate. It is not a national curriculum. It's guidance. It's guidance for developing teaching and learning at the local level. It's not about a series of facts, but really about probing questions that can promote the depth over the breadth of our American past. There's a number of design challenges that frame some of these questions, and I'd love to show those to you right now. There are 5 design challenges that really kind of prompt deeper discussion again, not just what we teach in history, but how we teach it. I'll give you a minute to look these 5 over. So I wanted to put special attention to number 4, which I mentioned before. How do we narrate our country's history in a way that is honest about the past without falling into cynicism about all the horrible things that have occurred, and there are horrible things that have occurred, but also appreciate our founding without tipping into too much adulation and celebration? They're balanced. The pro, the con, the yin, the yang, the good, the bad, all of it needs to be part of an honest teaching of American history in order to inform this new generation on what they can do to strengthen our democracy so that the words of the founders become truisms for everyone living in these United States. The roadmap also has 7 content themes, and you can see them. They're organized this way. We don't have time to get into a lot of them, but a deep look at these from teachers, curriculum writers would really be useful and helpful. But let me give you an example here. One of the themes is around civic participation, our favorite, of course, right? And it talks a lot about the relationship between self-government, civic participation, and what it relies on. There's thematic questions. There are key concepts for grades K through 5 through 6 through 12. So lots of opportunity to really get down to the small grain sizes and the weeds to really think about what are the rights, what are the responsibilities of citizenship, how can I participate in a way that's effective, that's responsible, that's safe. That's what we want to put forward. So here's a little quick example. Like I said, we don't have a lot of time. Kindergarten through grade 12. Is it too early to start in kindergarten? I would say no way. If you know any 5-year-olds in your life, boy, oh boy, they get it. They understand concepts of fairness, justice. You test this out next time you see a bunch of 5-year-olds and give some of them cookies and some of them not. They get it. They're not too young to get these concepts. How do I help my class or family? 5-year-olds understand that. 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds. How do people describe who they are? How do I describe myself? What does it mean to be part of a group? So young kids can start to have these conversations because this is the beginning of the foundation around being part of a community, part of a nation, part of being a contributor and engaged and empowered to make the world a better place. As we go spiral into grades 3 through 5, what are we talking about? 8, 9, 10-year-olds, right? It gets a little bit deeper. Why and how do people take action to solve problems? That kids know the importance of rules and the consequences of breaking rules. Who makes those rules? Why might we want to make changes at different levels? How can we promote change in a way that's going to make life better for everyone involved? How do you question decisions that are made? You know, most kids know rules are started in their home. Hopefully their parents are setting rules, limits, restrictions, consequences. Broaden that out to their community, their state, their nation. Grades 6 through 8 gets a little deeper here. And you could start to see, we start to study leaders, change makers. Who were they? What were their challenges? How were they prepared? Use them as role models. And then look at the civics ideas, the concepts here. What matters to me? How can I make what matters to me and myself more useful? Introducing the ideas of civil dialogue, investigation, analysis. All of these are great elements of high quality civic learning. How do I take advantage of digital tools in a responsible way? How do I engage members? Now, if you've laid this foundation, you're ready for high school. How do past generations address this? What can I do? What is the shape of civil society? What are the opportunities and responsibilities of citizenship and civic agency? And what opportunities are available to me? So this goes way beyond book learning, right, folks? This is about giving kids practice in practicing democracy, beginning at very young ages and spiraling up. Also part of this initiative is a pedagogy companion, because we can't just talk about the what unless we're also talking about the how. And we don't have time to go into depth, but when you go to their website, you can pull this down and talk about these elements for instruction that can inform instruction. Excellence for all, building the classroom, practicing agency, reflecting. These are all big, big elements that we're hoping teachers can dive into a little deeper. So this is a big initiative. There's a lot of work going forward to spreading it to all 50 states and getting it in the hands, not just in teachers, but school administrators and education policymakers at local and state levels. The goal is ambitious. Want to see 60 million students have access to high quality civic learning, because that's just not occurring right now. We want over 100,000 schools to be civic ready, to prioritize civic knowledge, skills, and dispositions, and over 1 million teachers. So yes, pretty ambitious, but we're hoping that presentations like this and engaging community members, like-minded folks, like all of you with the League, can help us achieve these goals in your local communities as well. So again, the hope of this initiative, and there's the website again, educatingforamericandemocracy.org. Think of EAD as a critical ingredient that our country can use to prepare young people. And we think of it as a three-legged stool, civic knowledge, skills, and agency, dispositions to have that long-term commitment. Okay. Now here's some other good news closer to home. California, yay. Our state Board of Education adopted a new updated history social science framework in 2016. And it's focused on 4 areas: on content, literacy, inquiry, and yes, citizenship needs to be a priority across all history social science classes, and I would say across all classes. So I hope the other message we're trying to make clear is, this is not just a social studies thing. We want civics to be integrated in science classes. It can be integrated in English classes, in all kinds of content areas. If it's a priority, we've seen remarkable examples of how schools have made that happen. Right out of the framework, words matter, we know. It says right in chapter 1, students need to take an active role as citizens and know how to work for change in a democratic society. And again, you can't just read about it in a book, you got to practice it. Students need to know their rights and their responsibilities. And I want to feature that responsibilities part. A lot of people these days talk about their rights, but we need to give attention to our personal responsibilities for the care and well-being of other Americans that live in our communities, in our state, and across our nation. And we want everyone to have that capacity and willingness to participate in those responsible ways, right out of our K-12 framework for social studies. So the Guardian of Democracy, if you're not familiar with that landmark document, that came out well over 10 years ago, but it highlights proven practices, all of these 6 proven practices that are implemented in schools are effective ways for teaching and assessing civic learning. And we want to bring these back to the forefront around these. Discussion of current events, service learning, extracurricular, school governance, seeing young people involved in setting policies for their schools, sitting on school boards. This is a big movement we hope to strengthen and see more of, and lots of simulations, really, really effective, right out of the framework. So this gives us some collateral, some oomph to give to schools and teachers and say, look, this is what our state, California, is calling for. What are we doing to make that happen?
10:15, Shannon.
Another exciting initiative from the California Department of Education is the State Seal of Civic Engagement. Hopefully you've heard about this. This was just launched last spring and getting a lot of attention. This was introduced first as an assembly bill with the intent of the legislature to establish this seal to encourage and create pathways for pupils to become civically engaged at different levels. That's the intent. Now, what happens is students can, if they meet the criteria, can earn this seal to affix to a diploma, a transcript, anything in their junior or senior year, because they're eligible to do that. Here's the criteria. What do students have to do to earn this seal? They need to be engaged in academic work. They need to demonstrate a competent understanding of our constitutions, not just the US one, but our state constitution, local governments, and how tribal governments function, their structure and organizations. They need to participate in one or more civic engagement projects that address real world problems. They need to demonstrate that knowledge, skills, and dispositions, and they need to exhibit character traits that reflect civic mindedness and their commitment. Now, that's the state criteria. What we're learning, though, too, is that local districts can determine if those students have met that criteria. So it's up to local schools to put things in place for them to meet that criteria, but also to determine if they've met it. And when young people get these seals, this is a really big deal for folks, and particularly for parents, to have that special gold seal affixed to your diploma, your transcript, your college applications. That's a really high selling point. We know colleges will look for that kind of thing, and so will jobs. So will interviewing for jobs, that will be a high priority. I know when my son earned his Eagle Scout award through Boy Scouts and had that there, that gave him a lot of credibility, and this seal does too. Another initiative I wanted to share with you is another great leader in our state, a champion for civics, our California Chief Justice, Tani Cantil Sakayue. Years ago, she established a task force and set forth a number of recommendations, because the judicial branch, of course, one of our three important branches of government, relies heavily on citizens to be engaged, to be informed, to be involved, particularly when we see those calls go out for jury duty, right? For other things that the judicial branch is responsible for. So our Chief Justice has been a real champion for this and has really dedicated herself to revitalizing civic learning in public schools through a number of programs and initiatives. Here's a copy. This is the cover of the task force report that was issued in 2014 with major recommendations in there around curriculum, professional learning, assessment, partnerships. And this has become kind of a blueprint, so to speak, a guiding document, again, that can support us in our efforts to promote civics in schools. The Chief Justice partners with our State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurman, to establish annual Civic Learning Awards. This began with the partnership with our former State Superintendent, Tom Torlakson, and now she's working with Tony Thurman on that. Every year, a call for applications come out for schools to submit an application that describes some of the great civic learning that they're doing in their school sites. Last year was tricky, of course, but still 32 schools did manage to promote good civic learning, even through distance learning, and a number of champions were awarded too. The application is going to come out again, probably in the fall, and so you'll see a lot of attention and a call for applications, because she wants to recognize schools that are doing great work. Over 400 schools in 30 counties have received this award so far, and they are highlighted. The 3 top schools in the nation before our pandemic received a personal visit from our Chief Justice. And I know she's anxious to start that up again once schools open up and we're freer to travel and do things. It really is a remarkable achievements for schools to be recognized through this program. Another great program that she sponsors is Judges in the Classroom. So obviously, one of the priorities for her and the judicial branch is to educate young people about the role of the judiciary. They learn a lot about the legislative branch. They learn a lot about the executive branch, the governor, the president, but sometimes our poor judicial branch gets a little short shrift. And so this program has just been hugely instrumental in bringing judges literally into classrooms to meet young people, to teach them about the judicial branch. They even give them lesson plans to implement. It's been widely, widely popular, all available at no cost. Now, obviously, in the last year, when the schools were closed, they conducted a number of these visits virtually, which was a real treat to have a guest speaker come into classrooms, all ages. And they may rely on that again. They're very likely going to rely on that virtual visits this coming year as well. Like I said, they're anxious to get there in person, but of course, safety is number one. That's going to be available now for teachers all across the nation. I'm sorry, all across the state. Now, here at LACO, we also have an initiative where we recognize schools, and it's called our California Democracy School Initiative. And this is a separate recognition, which basically recognizes schools who have institutionalized high quality civic learning across an entire grade level. Now, this is different than other recognitions, and I'll explain why. You know, we often do a lot of training here at LA County Office of Ed on civic learning practices, skills, how to help teachers implement that. But, you know, typically it's sort of kind of a checkerboard effect. I'll get a teacher from one school, two from another, which is great. We love to see them all. They go back and they implement in their classrooms. And so the students that are in those classrooms really benefit from that training. But if they're not in those classrooms, they miss out. So this initiative is really about creating space in schools that recognize, that include civic learning across an entire grade level. So if you're going through it it doesn't matter even what subject. It can be all 8th grade English or 10th grade history or 5th graders across a whole school. If they're doing this, they can be recognized. It's really kind of a systems piece to build competencies, to build that culture and environment, and to build those support systems that need to be there as well. So far, we have over 33 schools recognized as democracy schools. Most of them are here in Southern California. We have schools in Los Angeles County, Orange County, and many, many of our schools as democracy schools are in one district, the Anaheim Union High School District. Why? I'll tell you why. The superintendent, Michael Matsuda, has made civic learning a priority. He wants every one of those schools in his district to be democracy schools. He wants every student walking through his schools, whether it's a junior high, they're a high school district, so they don't have elementaries, but whether they're a junior high or a high school, to have that civic learning experience, which tells you when there's a will, there's a way. Those teachers are trained. They have figured out how to implement it, how to integrate it, how to keep the quality high. And you should see some of the amazing things these students are doing. Even last year, when everything was in lockdown, Cambridge Virtual Academy had kids come together and do these civic action projects. Their civic learning projects had to do with reducing the spread of COVID-19. They had a number of different projects. Kids were engaged, they connected, they talked to policymakers, they did their homework, they had dialogue, they went through all the steps, all virtually. And when we interviewed parents, it just was amazing. Some of the parents were saying, and we're hearing this from a lot of parents, this virtual environment, you know, all this Zoom teaching and whatnot, you know, they recognize that schools were doing the best they can, but it created a lot of depression and isolation for young people, no doubt. It affected self-esteem, social emotional learning, all of that. But the parents at Cambridge said, no, that didn't happen to my kid because he or she was so involved in a civic action project. They were energized, they were empowered, they were engaged, and they are grateful that there was great civic learning going on there during that past year to keep their kids on board and on track and happy. So, I mean, that just nearly brought tears to me to think about the power of this, considering all the challenges we've seen. So here's what we talk about when we talk about high quality civic learning. We want kids first to form an inquiry. Ask a question that is neutral, unbiased about an issue. What is being done around homelessness? What can be done to address the COVID spread? Then you go into a deep dive. Let's study the issue. Let's study the pro. Let's study the con. Let's know all the different points of view about this. Then let's have a dialogue about these. You know, kids want to tackle these really hot, controversial topics. You know, every time I would talk to a class, I'd say, what is the most important issue you're concerned about right now? And you'd be amazed, maybe not so, what kids say. They're concerned about racism. They're concerned about global warming. They're concerned about equity. The same things that we're challenged to think about. Terrorism, homelessness, issues that may or may not be directly impacting them today, but are impacting others. They're cluing into that. They want to learn about it. They want to talk about it. And we want to have a dialogue in classrooms and create that safe space so they can. Not a debate, not about yelling and screaming, but how can we learn from each other about these different points of view before we get to step 4 about communicating conclusions. You know, and it's sad, and maybe you'd agree, we're not seeing a lot of good examples of civil dialogue in our political landscape. We're hearing a lot of yelling and screaming and pointing fingers and arguing, but when are we sitting down with people we may disagree with and just listening to those different points of view before we come up with our own conclusion? Because it's only then that we are informed enough to take action in a responsible way. Is there room for compromise? What can we do so that parties can agree, even agree to disagree, but can move forward in a productive way? There's a wonderful resource. Won't have time to show you, but I do point you to it if you have time, from the Stanford History Education Group. Sam Weinberg there, just pure genius, him and his team, have created a program they call Civic Online Reasoning. And it takes teachers and students through different steps that when you pull up a website, how do you know it's legit? How do you know that the information on there is reliable? They've invented something called lateral reading. So when you pull up a website and it's, well, let's say Legal Women Voters, you can scroll down and find out who's in it and who's on their board and what their mission is. But there's other websites, you know, that can fool you. They can list all kinds of stuff that may or may not be true. So you open up a separate browser and do a search for that organization. Now, if you did a search for Legal Women Voters, you'll find all good, positive things. But there's other websites, other organizations that may not be the case. So this training is really great, all free, all available for teachers to guide them through with students and how to do that kind of thing. It's just awesome. Let's see what else. So I'll tell you, I want to show you a little video. I know I've been talking a lot. I'm sorry for all the lecture, but I want to show you some examples. When we take kids, and I say kids, I should say young people, because they're all ages there, through these steps, it is just remarkable to see the kinds of issues that they want to address, the kinds of questions that they want to ask. Let me show you what this looks like.
So our topic was microaggression, and our inquiry question was, how can we raise awareness about microaggressions and how they affect those targeted? And our supporting questions are, what are microaggressions? Are people aware of microaggressions? What are examples of gender-associated microaggressions? Do microaggressions limit opportunities for both genders? How do microaggressions affect people's feelings? And how can we raise awareness with the help of society?
So our topic was the fine arts, and our compelling question was, how can we get the schools to support the fine arts? Our supporting questions were, why are the fine arts not seen as curricular? What support is necessary? What are the barriers to parent involvement? What are the benefits in having the fine arts program in a school? What are the barriers to making the fine arts available to all students in all schools? What funding would be needed?
Our topic was women's rights, and our compelling question was, what are ways we can help address the problem of girls' inequality when it comes to sports? Our supporting questions were, what makes a sport manly and what makes a sport girly? What are some sports that girls are obligated to play? What sport is the most popular among girls? Why do girls feel limited in choices when it comes to sports? Why don't girls feel like they can play sports? Do the same amount of girls play sports as boys? And the last one is, why are women professional sports teams paid less than men professional sports teams? Thank you.
Isn't that incredible? I mean, now, those were not questions the teacher gave them. Those were questions that kids, the young people, the students came up with themselves. That's how you know there's critical thinking going on. That's how you know kids are engaged. They want to learn more. And out of that, they're going to launch into a huge investigation to find the answers to those questions they've raised. That's the goal we want to see. So I also want to take a minute and show another little video to you about the importance of these kinds of high quality discussions, because I truly believe of all the work we do in civic learning, this is probably the most important element of all. It needs to be taught, it needs to be facilitated, it needs to be very carefully orchestrated, and it takes practice. We have techniques and strategies and trainings to help teachers do this, but that it really is a priority if you're going to do any of this work. So let me pull up on another site and bring this up for you. Oops. Excuse me just a second. Here it is. Okay. And you'll see these wonderful leaders, Diana Hess and Paula McAvoy, national leaders in this work.
Critical for schools to provide opportunities for students to engage in discussions of highly controversial political issues, because first and foremost, those issues are what animates contemporary democracy. What we want to do in schools is assume that part of our job is to teach young people how to talk with one another, especially with people who have differing views.
There are particular discussion strategies that teachers can learn and that they can then teach their students. And that when you use strategies for discussion in the classroom, then you're moving students from materials to maybe paired discussions, to small group discussions, to large group discussions. And I think it's important to help parents, administrators, everybody understand what actually discussion looks like. We're not talking about necessarily at all times a very free-flowing discussion.
Our classrooms are a microcosm of the world that we live in. And we have to remember that when our students come to school, they bring all of their lived experiences with them. And it really informs how they engage with content, how they work collaboratively with their peers, and how they take in learning from their teachers. And so we have to ensure that our classrooms mirror the experiences that are happening in our world, because our students are living those experiences, whether we discuss them in the classroom or not. But the classroom creates a safe space for students to have a voice and to express how they feel, to learn about the history that informs the future, and for them to learn how to participate in a democratic society.
Your students, they're very knowledgeable about really a lot of things, but if you don't give us the opportunity to have those discussions, you'll never find out about them. If you think of your students more as your partners in learning, and you give them that space to speak their mind, then they'll be more receptive of what you're trying to tell them. And then in the same spin, you'll be receptive of what they're trying to tell you. And then just the relationship between a teacher and a student can grow from that.
Social justice is rooted in listening. And I think that when you listen to people, you send a very powerful message. And the message is that what they have to say matters to you, that what they have to say is important. And I think that when you do this in the classroom, you're sending this message to your students, and in turn, they feel very empowered. And once you have empowered students, there are no limits to what you can do in the classroom and what they can do.
I've had moments in my teaching where I'm just like, oh boy, like, why did we bring this up? And what do I do from here? Because kids get passionate. Controversy is going to always be a part of their lives. And to not give them the tools to be able to communicate and voice how they feel and have that empowerment to like feel like they can make a change, I think that would be a mistake. Their voice does matter. And I feel like that starts in the classroom. So that's what I've been trying to do. It's hard. And sometimes you feel unsuccessful at it, but I'm not going to ever stop doing that.
The research we did also showed that students who experienced highly engaging discussions in the classroom enjoyed their classes more. They were very interested in what their students had to say, and they reported that they were learning a lot in those classes as well. And so I think we need to sort of change the idea that students learn when teachers talk and say that, no, students learn when students talk.
When we talk about engagement in school and in classrooms, I often think people confuse engagement for involvement. And I think there's a big difference between those two words. Like involvement is just participating for, just for points or something like that. But engagement is not only involving yourself, but wanting to involve yourself. If you're not able to express yourself in a place where you spend 7 hours of your day, 5 days a week, like you're going to feel pretty disengaged, not interested in school. So these discussions allow us to get more involved, more interested, more engaged.
We can't limit it to a certain group of students or a certain race of students or type of student or a particular class. Every single student has a voice and every student's voice matters. And so we have to make sure that in all of our schools and all of our classrooms, every single student has the opportunity to engage in a meaningful way around the types of ideas and situations that will help to inform their thinking, their actions, and ultimately their futures as they work towards building a better tomorrow.
In classes where there had been frequent and high quality discussion, students were much more likely to be politically engaged. They were much more likely to want to do things like pay attention to the news. And they didn't demonize difference in the way that students in classrooms that didn't have high quality discussion did. So we heard students say, for example, thank God for Mr. Smith because he gave us experience hearing views that were different from our own and taught us and helped us develop the skills that we needed to deal with that in a productive way.
Regardless of where you are or who you're with, you have to be able to discuss things, like discuss certain topics and get your point across and do it respectfully. So I feel like that should be taught as much as possible because that's what we depend on.
So those two women are heroes. They are leading this work across the nation, Diana Hess and Dr. Paula McAvoy. And so we are grateful to them. I'm telling you, it just gives me chills every time I see that. Imagine if that going on in every classroom in our nation would be just remarkable. Because, and one quote, I hear something different every time. When Dr. Hess said, students learn not to demonize difference. Think about that for a minute. We are just seeing that happen way too often. And what's worrisome to me is this is what's being modeled to our next generation of young people, our future citizens, and even the current citizens. This is not the way democracy should be operating. This work is difficult. It's challenging, but if we don't make it a priority, our democracy is going to continue to feel like it's disintegrating and not moving forward in really achieving the goals and vision in which it was established so long ago. So yes, we love this. We want to see it more. We see it in a lot of places. And so we heighten that, we showcase that. I want to show you another example close to home. I talked about our friends in Anaheim. Here's something that happened in real time a few years ago. You may or may not have seen this in the local news, but it's becoming a bigger issue. We just saw on the news yesterday how a Confederate statue of Robert E. Lee was removed from Richmond, Virginia. Well, a few years ago, one of the high schools in Anaheim was called the Rebels. And that issue came to the forefront. And Superintendent Matsuda decided, you know what? Because these students are part of our Democracy School initiative, we're going to ask them to address it. Here's the news report from what happened describing that event.
This is the mascot that represents Savannah High School in Anaheim. Johnny Rebel is also the cause of controversy and debate at the school and in the community. Today, more than 500 students listened as their classmates made arguments to keep, replace, or rebrand the mascot.
This is not a black and white issue. The issue at hand is between right and wrong.
Keeping a symbol that links back to when blacks were discriminated should not be what's representing our school.
The forum caps a week of research for the students, learning more about who Johnny Rebel is, an icon of the Confederacy. Some students who want to keep the mascot argue that's not what it means to them, and changing it would erase more than 50 years of history at the school.
If you take away Johnny Rebel, if you take away our mascot, it means we're no longer fighting.
Johnny Rebel doesn't stand for any individual person or ideal. He stands for the rebel spirit.
In the end, the student body voted to rebrand the Rebel. Their process is something officials say adults could learn from.
It was focused on the issues, not on the individuals. So I think that's the example that we wanted to set for the country.
The vote is only a recommendation to the school board. Dion Thomas is a parent who brought the issue to the school. He says it goes far beyond the campus.
It's for the nation as a whole to understand that some things in the past is not accepted in today's time. And this is one of those things.
The school board is set to take up the mascot issue at its next meeting early next month. Reporting in Anaheim, Greg Lee, ABC 7, Eyewitness News.
So what I love about this example is there's a lot of ways to solve this issue, to address this problem. Superintendent could have gone a lot of different ways, could have just made a decision or not made the decision. But you see how civil that conversation was. The students researched this issue. They gave the pro argument, they gave the con argument. And what emerged out of that was sort of a compromise. There were students who were really tied to this idea that we like being rebels, not so much tied to Johnny, but we don't want to lose the rebel part. And that's where that option of rebranding came to the forefront as an option, which ultimately the students you saw had voted for. Get rid of the Johnny, but let's still become rebels. Now, this wasn't the end of the story, right? So they had to go to the school board. It became a school board decision. So I went to that school board meeting, and I have to tell you, there was a lot of passion on both sides of this issue. You can imagine people were very heated about this. This was very personal for a lot of people. Strongly wanted it gone, strongly wanted to keep it, everything in between. The room was packed. They had it in a huge auditorium. The school board listened carefully to everyone who came to the podium with their point of view. Here's the conclusion.
After a weeks-long debate between students and the school board, Savannah High School's nickname will remain the Rebels. Dozens of students had asked to change the mascot, Johnny Rebels, so it wouldn't be connected to the Confederacy. Even though the name Rebels will stay, the board agreed to rebrand the mascot.
So there you go. Johnny disappeared, but they still remain as rebels. All of the icons of the Confederacy have been removed. The high school kids are still considered rebels, but they lost the Confederacy attachment to that. What was so profound about this at that moment was when the school board approved that proposition to rebrand. One of the school board members said, "We've listened to all the arguments. We listened to the process that you students went through to come to this conclusion. We have never been so proud of a student body who went through a process like this and practiced democracy as it should be practiced. And I think because of that, they felt confident, they felt secure in going with the students' recommendation. A lot of us were crying. The kids were like, oh, that's great. I don't know if they realized the hugeness of this, but it was huge, which just shows you when students are prepared, when they practice, when they're civil, respectful, great things can happen. Not all the time, we know that, but it is more possible. We're continuing to do training for teachers and how to do this. If you know of any schools that would like to get on board, we have an online course where we walk you through each of those stages with practice on how to do it. We have another website at LACO that showcases video modules on each of these 5 steps with a lot of classroom footage. Some of it I showed to you before. They can pull that up. That's all free and accessible. We're hoping to have a face-to-face training in October. Not so sure at this point. If we can't do face-to-face, we'll switch it to virtual, but that's another opportunity for teachers to learn these techniques, to make this a priority, and how to walk through those different steps. Basically, young people want to get involved. They care about the world around them. We need to mobilize that enthusiasm and engage them in projects, conversations, actions. But I really encourage teachers to go through the training first, because it can be a slippery slope sometimes. It's real easy for something to go haywire or off a cliff. So that's why the training is so critical, so that it helps you facilitate it in effective ways. There's lots of resources out there. If you don't get training from LACO, which of course I love for people to do, but they can reach out to any of these nonprofit organizations that offer similar support and training for civics. They are all very, very much committed to wanting to move civic education forward. We want to see civics at the center of every student's K-12 education. Like I said, it's not just a social studies thing. We're seeing civics integrated through career technical education, through health education. Next week, I'm doing training with tobacco use prevention education coordinators. Their primary mission is to teach young people about tobacco, vaping, marijuana, and the harm it can cause. We're going to take them to the next step and engage kids in activities where they can take civic agency to move policies forward to address these terrible health hazards. So again, civics at the center as a priority, not just to learn about these subjects, but to really empower young people to move forward wherever they go, college, career, whatever path they take. We want them to be civically engaged. A last piece I wanted to tell you about, we talked about resources. There is a federal bill that is moving through Congress now. It's HR 1814, also known as the Civic Secures Democracy Act. It was introduced bipartisan. Let's hear it for that. That's a great thing too. By these representatives. It was introduced in the Senate by Senator Coons and Cornyn, Democrat and a Republican. And here's what it would authorize if it passes. This would be huge. $1 billion in federal funding every year for 5 years to support civic education. What's the rationale? Well, we've been talking about the rationale. These legislatures are understanding it as well. The act will provide grants for states. This is good news. And will require them to participate in more of the NAEP testing in civics and history. It provides funding for qualified nonprofit organizations to assist with civic education, and also resources for institutes of higher education to continue to conduct the kind of research we need to support and promote civics. It also will establish a fellowship program to diversify history and civics teaching course through these kinds of programs. and also has provisions of the USA Civics Act of 2020 to update provisions for Higher Education Act. More support for teachers, for colleges, for teacher professional development, teacher education, to promote and put civics at the center. Again, it talks more about the NAEP, upping the influence of that and the importance of that, academic to address student academic achievement in public and private schools at least every 2 years. We shouldn't have to wait 10 or more years for the test to roll around again to assess in civics and history. So it would cause for more frequent testing with that. And there's some folks as well there too. Now the bill currently, because I got the update yesterday, I wanted to stay current for you, it is in a holding pattern. They are hoping to reintroduce the bill at the end of September. And they are continuing to try to build co-sponsorships for that. But if it passes, it could provide a lot of good funding for civic education in states, including California, and trickling down to the local level. All right, I want to wrap up quickly, but you know, nothing is better than hearing the impact of this work from the mouths of students themselves. And I wanted you to hear a few. Now, here's a young lady from Bell High School. This is a working class environment in Bell, high immigrant, high minority representation, lower SES. And this young woman was involved in a civics program with Constitutional Rights Foundation. I want you to hear what she said after going through that program.
I was done with the Civic Action Project. I realized that we could do something, that we were doing something, and that we did have a voice. Education wasn't the only problem in our school. In our communities, we were facing gentrification, we were facing a lot of homelessness, issues that we felt helpless towards, alone. However, collectively, we felt we had a voice. And I think this is a great lead into the fact that after the Civic Action Project, I actually felt empowered to join other councils, not only my schools. I thought, hey, what about if I join my mayor's council? What can we do there? What issues are they facing? Is it just money? Is it just the funding? Or is it bigger, broader, other issues? So what did I do? I actually ended up joining my mayor's youth council. And it wasn't just students from my school. It was students from a diverse background from other schools. However, we were focused on West LA. And it was amazing to see that there were so many students that knew that they had a voice and that they were there to share their opinion and to represent the communities. So now as a student, as a college freshman, I'm going in here knowing that we can do something. And I know that USC is going to have so many resources with the community, so many network opportunities. And I'm just so excited to see what we can do with so much more resources and so much more funding. Yeah.
Don't you wish you could bottle that for every student graduating high school in our state? I just love it. I can't say enough about it. I want to show you a couple more. Don't worry, I'm almost done here. Oh, you'll love Alex. Now, Alex is in Simi Valley. This is kind of a bedroom community. He organized a school-wide voter registration drive. I knew you'd like this. You guys are in the league, of course. And he brought in people from the league. He did a huge drive. He got all these kids registered because, as you know, they can register before they turn 18. And he did this all during school lockdown. Imagine, all through distance learning. He's going to UC Berkeley. He's probably started, well, anytime now. It's fall semester, fall quarter. But here's his takeaway.
The biggest kind of takeaway I had from putting this week together and seeing it through to completion was it filled me with a lot of hope for the future. Seeing how it was able to get so many students, so many community members, people who really didn't need to be there, to bring them all together and all engaging with huge issues that are essential to our functioning democracy and just the functioning world as a whole, that it really gave me a lot of hope for the future that we were able to do this in the first place. And seeing especially how students kind of took what they were learning, what they were hearing, and really took it to heart that, they wanted to get more involved, that they registered, they pre-registered to vote. We had lots of registration over this week that, it wasn't just a week full of knowledge and then we're going to forget about it. It was really kind of a start of so many people's engagement with being involved in the civic process, that people do really care about these issues, and that they care about our democracy, about this civic process. So I think seeing all of that really gave me a lot of hope.
Are you smiling as much as I am? I mean, you don't get that kind of response from traditional textbook teaching and learning, right? When you engage young people in these activities, this is the product. This is the potential. This is what we need to move our democracy forward. So you hopefully can see why we're so passionate about making this available for every young person across the nation, and of course throughout our state and our local school districts. One last one. This one's real short. This is Zachary Patterson. This young man, boys, he got a future. He is serving on the San Diego Unified School District Board of Education, and he founded a group called California Student Board Member Association. He's on a mission, this young man, to get a young person, a student, to sit on every single school board across the state. And he's really gung-ho on this. Here's his final comments for us.
We are looking to move forward together, united. And the only way we do that is by educating people on their rights, their knowledge, and their history as an indicator of our future. That's civics education in a nutshell. And that's what we're here to fight for. It's the foundation of our democracy. And it's up to us if we want to save it.
How's that? It's up to us if we want to save it. And I think it's up to all of us. How can we get to this, so aptly said, through our Educating for American Democracy initiative? The difference between civil disagreement and civic friendship. Can we have both? The capacity and commitment to fighting fair, to engaging in debate with a commitment to honesty, trustworthiness, charitable interpretation, and moving forward together. Regarding one another as fellow Americans, capable of sharing ideals, principles, constitutional forms of self-government, even as we vigorously debate our philosophical or policy differences. Whoops. And finally, how can we all engage in reflective patriotism by uniting love of country with clear-eyed wisdom about our successes and our failures in order to chart our forward path? This is the work we're doing, and I am so enamored and grateful to the work you are doing to set us on this forward path for the future of our democracy, our nation, and our world. So thank you for the opportunity to share the work we're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Kim, thank you. You were going to start with the
question and answer portion.
Yes, thank you.
Well, I show a question in the question and answer box. It's by Dorothy Keene. What advice would you give the League of Women Voters, Pasadena area, to empower schools in our service and implement a civic engagement curriculum?
I take it that's for me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, certainly getting to the policymakers at school districts is an important thing. When they see, policymakers respond to the demands of their community usually. So I think putting forth that message that we have this need, we need to make space for this, we need to make room, we need to dedicate resources. Districts have access to funding and resources to make it a priority if it is a priority for them. So yeah, I would say reach out to those school districts and particularly the school boards and superintendents and administrators.
All right, next question. Please define critical race theory and explain why it appears controversial.
Okay, that's a good question. It comes up a lot. So the way we understand critical race theory is a theory that's introduced basically in law schools at higher ed to understand systemic racism and institutionalized racism over time. I feel like it's often been misconstrued as a way to indoctrinate young people, to make them feel guilty about their past or their position. That is not the intent. It is not taught in K-12 education. It's not a focus of the work, even though we do want to give an honest history of our nation's past. So yeah, I think it's been misrepresented in the context of introducing content, ethnic studies, controversial issues as an agendized item to change students' ideologies or connectiveness to their heritage. I think that's a misnomer. I think it's misperception. So, yeah.
All right. What is the progress among districts in adopting an ethnic studies course within the high school curriculum?
Okay, so that's a good question too. Yes. So, as you know, our State Board of Education has adopted a model curriculum for ethnic studies. It provides guidelines for districts if they want to introduce an ethnic studies course. Some districts are moving forward with that, some are waiting. At the LA County Office of Education, we are recommending for schools to wait, to slow down a little bit, because ethnic studies too can be very, very controversial, particularly if it's not presented in a way that is responsible, that is balanced, that is fully aware and creating that safe space in classrooms ahead of time to have those difficult conversations, because it'll bring up some difficult conversations about history, about race, about racism. And those conversations need to occur. But we recommend commitment to professional development training in creating first that safe space for teachers. How do you facilitate a conversation about a controversial issue that in a way that's not going to implode on you or send you down a bad path? How can you institute perhaps restorative justice practices? Teaching students to listen to each other for understanding, social emotional learning, really setting that stage before jumping into the ethnic studies coursework. Now, there is a bill moving forward, as you know, in the legislature. I think it's AB 101, that would require ethnic studies as a graduation requirement in California. That bill has not passed yet. It was first introduced and vetoed by the governor, but it's been reintroduced. If that bill passes, then it will be a requirement for the class of 2029 to 2030. And schools will have until 2025-26 to institute some sort of ethnic studies option, either as a standalone elective or even something that might be integrated into an existing history course. So we're seeing lots of things around. Some are moving forward, some are being cautious and waiting. And that's what we're recommending at LACO, to go into this slowly and carefully.
Another question on ethnic studies, is there any collaborative movement among districts, colleges, cities to inaugurate ethnic study courses for adult residents?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I have not heard much about that where I sit, because the conversation is usually around K-12, but I know it has been very popular at colleges and universities for college students. But for the general adult population, no, I have not heard much effort going that way.
Have you found civic education programs that actively engage students in civic education experiences of their choice?
Well, yeah, that's usually where these things start. Let me just say, there's a couple ways to go at it. I've seen classrooms where teachers will open it up, just open up conversation. What are issues that are of concern to you? And those ideas are generated from students. You may have a group over here that are really worried about homelessness in their community. Another group's worried about climate change. Another group's and they will let them go and go through that. Another way to go at it is within the context of the classroom itself. So I've seen science teachers, high school science teachers, they address the NGSS standards. One of them is man's impact on the environment. That's part of their curriculum. So they'll study about man's impact on the environment and issues that surround them in their community. I've seen them do surveys. What kind of energy sources should we be using at our district? What are the pro and con? They come to consensus. They'll present their findings to a superintendent or a school board. So I've seen it both ways. Either it's sometimes integrated within the content they're studying, or it's an open-ended dialogue for them to choose what they want to focus on.
In election years, the league likes to go to the schools, explain ballot measures, and register or pre-register the students to vote. But we need to be invited by teachers and principals. Can you help us with that?
Absolutely. That's one thing I do too, is I have a listserv that goes out to teachers across the county. And I'm always happy to promote programs and ideas for that. I know the league has been very active in Alhambra School District, and they do a whole mock election, and I know the league's been involved there. Our friend Alex out in Simi. So yeah, if you have a resource or place that teachers can reach out to, send it to me and I can send it out.
I don't think we're gonna have time to get to all the questions.
Oh.
If you could make electronic slides available for use for the League of Women Voters small group discussions. We have one in the middle of this month.
Sure, let's talk more. I think you have the slides too in that drive. If you wanted to share that link, I'm happy to do that.
And I want to thank Dr. Herzog for your insightful presentation on educating for American democracy. As that last student who spoke so aptly said, it's up to us. So I know this will inspire us to take the next steps to help support civic education. So this concludes our program. I'd like to thank everyone for virtually coming, as well as everyone responsible for putting on this worthwhile program.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, I wanted to introduce finally Martha Zavala, our League of Women Voters Pasadena Area President, who will be giving closing remarks and more.
Thanks. Thank you very much. And thank you, Dr. Herzog, for reminding us that it's never too late, never too soon to start teaching lifelong skills to help students become engaged in civic life. You know, I've always thought that instead of mock elections, students should be voting on issues that impact them during the school day. It's more effective, I think, an effective way to instill the mindset needed for active participation, because they can see results in their lives. I visit schools every year, and I was impressed by one classroom envisioning, the students were envisioning the future where teachers become facilitators. In other words, they give them the resources and information that they need to get answers, and then student teams become the forum for actual learning. But thank you for making us aware of the wonderful work already being done by educators to make that hard right turn to transform our education system for the betterment of our communities and the nation, and to be much more nimble citizens in order to deal with the problems that we're facing. And I think this new trend is just wonderful. It's so exciting to imagine it. Thank you very much for taking your time and spending your morning with us. I also want to remind you all that Pasadena Media is recording this session, this wonderful session. Please be sure to go to our YouTube channel and share it far and wide, because this is such an important topic. And while you're there, please take a look at 3 videos created by our newest members. All 3 of them are high school seniors at Pasadena High. They wrote their own scripts. And tomorrow they're hosting a voter registration drive during their lunch hour. So we're very blessed to have them with us. Very excited to see what they're going to be doing. They're such bright individuals. So now let's go to the part where we like to take action. It's so very, very important that we do our part. So I would like to share my screen with you and see if I can get this going. Just a minute. I hope you can see the presentation. Actually, I kind of messed it up. But anyway, what we really want you to do is to, if you see this QR code here, you can go to our US area league to actually see the, to actually get an email out to your senators to pass this legislation that's so critical for us, because there are, you know, numerous states right now trying to pass voter suppression laws. And I think Dr. Herzog mentioned, I mean, people have to be civically engaged in order to hang on to our democracy, our American democracy, which is so precious. If you don't really want to do a QR code and you'd rather call, this is the telephone number, so you can call your senators to pass both the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. I hope that before you kind of fade away, that you will actually take down this telephone number and ask for your senators, and you will be given, sent to their office. You either will be able to speak to a staffer, speak to the senator, or you'll be able to leave a voicemail message. But it's really important that we get the message out there that this legislation is very, very critical in order for us to really have this kind of a civic engagement going. You know, it's really important for us to make sure that we do, in fact, have a voice left through our votes. We know in California it's not as big an issue, but this is why we need federal law to come in and at least set up a high bar for what voting should be across the nation. It should not be that this is one of the things you have to worry about when you decide you're going to move to another state. Am I going to be able to vote or not? That's not the way our democracy should be functioning. So please take a look, go ahead and do that. And we really would appreciate any action you take. So I just want to say that this does in fact conclude our session, that we have a couple of more things. We can, I want to thank our moderators and Zoom hosts and Catherine, but I believe that we do have our next event to share, a screen, our final closeout screen. And here it is again, information. But on Thursday, on October 7th, our next League Day, Thursday with the League, we have J. Morgan Kuser, Professor Emeritus History and Social Sciences from Caltech, talking about protecting our right to vote. And this is why it's so important to go ahead and take action. And hopefully you will see the information available to you to contact our legislators and take action today on the For the People Act, on the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and then to hear about what more we can do from the professor next month. So again, thank you to everyone. I want to thank again our Zoom hosts, Hester, Valerie, and Catherine, and of course, Dr. Herzog. That was such a great presentation. And I'm so glad that our Education Committee was able to get hold of you to come in here. That's a great movement that's been started. And thank you to Pasadena Media. And last but not least, thank you all for joining us and hanging in here with us. We hope to see you again at our next October 7th event. And keep informed about our league activities. Go to our website at lwvpa.org. And please don't forget to vote. Send in your vote by mail ballot or walk into a vote center if you misplaced it. Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon.